Welcome to our first 11 a.m. service. If you are someone who, regularly attends Central, what did you do with your extra hour? Did you travel the world, visit someplace new and made it to church? So exciting. Some of you, it's your first time in a long time. You've been early, which is awesome. It's great to have you here. If you are newer to Central, my name's Tomas, and I'm thankful that you're with us as well. Growing up, one of the worst questions I could be asked, and I think probably a lot of teenagers and young adults hate this question too, is what do you want to be when you grow up? What a terrible question. I think about my kids, they can hardly remember to put the dishes away, clean up their rooms, and I expect them to know what to do with their life. Like, I have no idea. And I'm at a point in my life now where no one's asking me that because I am supposed to be grown up. And so I'm asked questions like, well, where do you see yourself in 5 years? It's just as difficult a question. I have no idea. I hope to be alive. I hope that my family's still with me. That's just all I kind of know. But I think we ask these questions, we want to know answers to these questions because we want some sort of direction. All of us long to know, okay, what do I do now? People, ask this question, for example, what is God's will for my life? Or if I ask you this question, what is the reason for your life? What would your answer be? And the reason why we ask some of these questions, why we wonder maybe what God would want for us, or maybe what we'd like to know the future to hold, is because it gives some sort of purpose, right? It aligns our priorities, what's important, what's urgent, what do I need to value, what behaviors do I need to have? It gives a bit of motivation. Where's my heart in all this? What am I accountable to? The things I believe in, where I'm going, is my life matching what I think that is? In a sense, it's important to know because it defines, our perspective, and consequently, kind of defines what we do every single day. If you have an idea of where we're going, we all live for something. All of us long for a purpose. To see the three most basic questions a human needs to answer, maybe you've heard me say this before, maybe you've heard it yourself, is this: who am I? Why am I here? And does my life make a difference? They say those are three questions that every human longs to answer whether they know that or not. Who am I? Why am I here? And what difference does my life make? There is this book in the Old Testament called Judges, and it's a really interesting book because it's usually mixed with all the ways that God's people messed a lot of things up. There were some highlights, for sure, but it was mostly bad. And the very last verse of that book is super interesting. It says this: in those days, Israel had no king. Everyone did as they saw fit. And what it's meaning to tell us is that because there was no one giving direction, there was no one giving them an idea of where to do and who they are and where to go, and they kind of just did what they wanted, and they fell apart as a nation because of that. Because when you have a bit of direction, you kind of have an idea of what you need to do. It starts directing your life. But I'm letting you know this morning that we are not without a king. And in fact, I'm going to probably go a little bit bigger than maybe what you were expecting this morning, and it's this. I want to answer the question, what is God's will for your life? That's where I'm going this morning. In our passage in Romans 12, what you're going to find is that it's clear that God has this incredible vision for the world, and consequently, because of that, if you are a follower of Jesus, he has a will for your life. There's something that he longs for you to do, that he wants you to do, and it should define our perspective, and it should inform our living every single day. When you're reading the passage, it starts in verse 1, of course, and there's this really important word, and it says, therefore. And what we have here is from Romans 1 to 11, if you were to read it, it's this story of the good news of Christ, of how we were once far away, and not because of anything we did, but because of what he did, he brings us close and calls them friends. No matter who you are, no matter your gender, anything like that, he brings you close and makes you his own. But in chapter 12, he pivots. And the pivot is like, okay, you've received the good news, but now the expectation is for you to begin living the gospel, living the good news. What difference does it now make in your life? So in light of this unmerited but unlimited grace and mercy and transforming love of God, there is this expectation that we would align to his will, to his desires, in gratitude. And that's the life that we're called to. And it defines our identity. He says to offer yourselves as living sacrifices. It changes our behaviors, our values, and priorities. He continues and says, don't be conformed to the patterns of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. And he gives purpose. He says, so that you would know the good, pleasing, and perfect will of God. Now, if you're not familiar with the Bible, Paul is the one who wrote Romans, and he actually writes a number of letters. And in another letter to this book in Ephesus, he says this in a different way. Be very careful then how you live, not as unwise, but as wise, making the most of every opportunity because the days are evil. Therefore, do not be foolish, but understand what the Lord's will is. So it begs the question, what is God's will for my life? Isn't it different for all of us? I'm going to burst your bubble. No, it's not. It's not. And here's the thing about knowing God's will for your life. Kind of like I mentioned earlier. It gives us purpose. It aligns priorities. It defines values and behaviors. It keeps us accountable to those things. And it gives us motivation. It gives us a reason to be. So it's no wonder that one of the questions I'm asked the most out of any other question is this. Thomas, how do I know God's will for my life? Because I want to know what my life should look like. What do I really need to care about? Where am I going? Why am I here? Will my life make a difference? I want my life to make a difference. What is God's will? And I'll say this, God has a will for you no matter who you are in this room. If you've been following Jesus for 183 years, he's got a will for you. If you've been following Jesus yesterday, he's got a will for you. If you don't follow Jesus, surprise, he has a will for you too. If you are a stay-at-home parent, he's got a will for you. If you are a lawyer, a banker, a teacher, a burger flipper, he's got a will for you. He's like Oprah. Look under your chairs, everyone gets a will. That's kind of the way that God has placed it. Everyone, God has a will for you, a purpose for your life. What is it? That's where we're going this morning. That's when I help us kind of unfold and get through. Is that okay? The one thing that I want you to know, and we learn in this passage is this, is that the will that God has for you is actually bigger than you think. There is this famous actor, maybe you know him, his name is John Krasinski, and he played Jim in The Office. And a pretty famous guy, and during COVID, because of all the bad news that people were hearing, and people in pretty negative moods, I don't know if you remember this thing called COVID, but he started a YouTube channel that was just called Some Good News. And the idea was just to highlight great things that were happening. And he brought different actors and actresses on, and they kind of shared good news, talked about it. And I want to give you some statistics. So it debuted on YouTube on March 29th, 2020, and accumulated over 300,000 subscribers overnight. The first episode appeared on YouTube's trending page and was viewed 3.1 million times one day after being updated. And it had been viewed 12 million times just a few days later. Within the first 8 weeks, the 8-episode series drew in over 72 million views and 2.58 million subscribers, even winning an award. And I think it was so big because people are just like, just tell me something other than bad news. Because we long for good news. Because doesn't it feel like often evil creeps in? Whether it's in our own hearts or it's our families or it's just culture, I mean, you think of this past week, you think about the things you're trying to protect your kids or family from or yourself from. It feels often, it doesn't take a long time. You don't have to look hard to feel like evil is encroaching in a real way. So what do we do? Do we hide? Do we insulate ourselves from anything that would cause us pain or anything like that? Do we bury our heads in the sands? Do we just keep waiting for Jesus to come back? Or do we just, share your opinion on social media and fight online trolls? What do we do? What do we do? Verse 9 in our passage says this: hate what is evil, cling to what is good. But he even goes further than this. In verse 21, it says, do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. Cling to and practice what is good. Now, that sounds too easy. But I don't want you to be fooled. This is not a small ask. Think about it. Think, what kind of good would this be? Well, first of all, if you're reading the passage, you got to understand, when push comes to shove, the kind of good that Paul is directing us to do is the kind of good that can overcome evil. That when things are closing in and evil is beginning to come, it can overwhelm it, it can defeat it, it can overpower it, it can make evil tap out. This kind of good can overcome evil. So God's will is that you would cling to and practice a kind of good that can do that. But then you think a little bit deeper and you're like, well, what is the only thing that really could overcome evil? It's more than platitudes, good intentions, and positive stories. I mean, those are all really nice things. But the good that we're talking about, that Paul is talking about, is an outflow of a surrendered life that has been transformed by God's goodness and love. Think about your own life. If you've made a decision to follow Jesus, it has conquered death in you. There's only one thing that can conquer death and evil, and that is the power of Christ. It means receiving and exercising the power of God's transforming love wherever you are and in every situation. God's will for you, for your life, is to cling to and practice that kind of good. The kind of good that can overcome evil. Do we hide? No. Do we bury our heads in the sand? No. Are we wise? Of course. But we cling to and practice a good that can overcome evil. That's a big ask. So what does that look like, though? In practice, how do you even do that? Well, it's actually simpler than you think. If you were to read chapter 9, which I'm going to do for you, and I thank you, Gordon, for doing it for us this morning. Chapter 12, verse 9 to 16, I'm going to read it for you, if that's okay. And then I'm going to jump down to verse 21 after that. It says this: love must be sincere. Hate what is evil, cling to what is good. Be devoted to one another in love, honor one another above yourselves. Never be lacking in zeal, but keep your spiritual fervor, serving the Lord. Be joyful in hope, patient in affliction, faithful in prayer. Share with the Lord's people who are in need and practice hospitality. Bless those who persecute you. Bless and do not curse. Rejoice with those who rejoice, mourn with those who mourn, live in harmony with one another, and do not be proud, but be willing to associate with people of low position. Do not be conceited. Then jumping down to verse 21. Do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. In this list, Paul has 21 things to do. 21 attributes to what doing this good looks like. It's 21 ways for us to do his will. And this is why I love it. It's because God doesn't hide it from us. He's not burying it like some sort of treasure. I mean, if we take our time and read the Word of God and get into it and meditate on it and pray through it, God makes it very clear what it looks like to work in his will, to do these things. That the outflow of a surrendered life that has been transformed by God's goodness and love will look like and sound like these things. That we will mourn with those who mourn, rejoice with those who rejoice, that we be patient in affliction, that we will continue to pray, that we will be joyful in hope, we bless those who persecute us, we will not curse. This is what it sounds like for someone who's been transformed by the gospel to live, is to cling to and practice this kind of good. And believe it or not, it is this kind of good, when practiced with sincere love, that I actually really believe can overcome evil. It can transform you, it can transform us, and I seriously think it can transform the world. Now, hear me out. On the surface, this list may seem too simplistic. All right, I'll keep praying. Cool, I'll rejoice. But if you really take a look at the list and wonder about what it's asking of you, you'll actually begin to realize how non-conforming to the culture that list actually is. In fact, I wanted to do it and make it easier for you. And what I did is I actually rewrote this list in my own translation, according to my will, and I call it Romans chapter 12. And this is what it says. Pursue evil. Cling to what is easier to do. Let others do their thing and be devoted to your thing. Ensure you are honored and valued and disconnected from those who don't see your value. Lose your ambition for his will and make your spiritual well-being secondary. Serve when it is convenient or serves you best. Live for here. Avoid and protect yourself from hardship. Trust in yourself. Grow indifferent to the needs around you, even if that means to your own family. Best action, shrink your world. Don't be taken advantage of. Be critical. And don't consider the other. That's their business. Get jealous and compete. Empathy is weak. Surround yourself with others who serve your peace and well-being. Be proud. Boast about what you've accomplished. And make sure you're maximizing your circle of influence for greatest gain. Obsess over becoming better. Strong wills defeat weak ones. I went through every attribute, and this is the direct reflection of those attributes, according to my will. Because my internal will, my naturally occurring desire wants to override his will. To sincerely love others and do good. I don't know about you, I need my will transformed by him. Because it's easy for me to follow the words of Romans. It's a lot harder for me with sincere love to do the things that he's called me to do in Romans. I think that's why Paul starts this section with love must be sincere. And what he means by love must be sincere, it's literally not hypocritical. That there's not a sense of gain out of it, but you're doing it because you have truly been transformed by God and you are in love with doing this for other people. And I got to tell you, that's not me all the time. At all. And I think that's the point. It's reminding us that we can't do it on our own, and that's why I love Paul. He also writes this book to the church in Galatia, and he says this, the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, forbearance, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. And I got to tell you, if you take that list of 21 attributes, they all fit into that fruit of the Spirit. The basis of our ability to do it is being empowered by the Spirit of God to be transformed. This is probably why when Jesus was teaching us to pray, he said this, pray, your will be done, your kingdom come on earth as it is in heaven. And here's what we can't miss. If we allow the Spirit of God to empower us, to transform us, as we choose to cling to and practice what is good, not only will it transform you, I honestly think it can transform others. Because it's so countercultural. God's will for your life is to cling to and practice that kind of good. It's bigger than you think. It's simpler than you think. But it's also closer than you think. You know, there was this story of a young adult years ago. I'd known him. He was part of a couple missions teams I've done, some discipleship, and this was like about a year or two, when after he graduated high school, and he phones me. He's like, hey, Tomas, I want to tell you this wild story. So you know how I went to China to teach English? I'm like, yeah, I know. And he's like, yeah, while I was there, I met some kids, and I ended up sharing the gospel with some of these kids. They told their parents, and that was not allowed. And so I was arrested and put into jail. I was there for a few days. I didn't know what to do. Then he explained how he had this, I can't remember the exact details, but he explained how there was like, he was miraculously let out of prison or out of the jails, and he had a sympathetic jailer who sent him to the consulate. They're able to get his stuff back and send him home at night. And he tells me this wild story. I'm like, oh my goodness, this is like incredible. A couple months down the road, he called me. He's like, you know that story that I told you about China? I'm like, yeah. He's like, yeah, that was all a lie. None of that happened. I realized I have a real bad time with lying, and I was like, yeah, you could tell me. And And he's like, I have a bad time with lying, and I kind of made it up because I was really scared because things just didn't work over there like I thought they were. And it's really interesting because, for about 15 years, I worked with youth and young adults mostly, and the one thing I'd hear all the time is, what are you going to do after you graduate? Backpack in Europe, like 90% of the time, right? Because I want to go and find myself. I said, you know what's the problem with going somewhere else? You're still there, and it sucks. You're going to find that you're still there. And all the problems that you hope to run away from, they just seem to just stay here. I bring that up because it is so clear in this passage that Paul commands that we start right here among each other. That you and I will not discover God's will for our life somewhere out there. He has designed it that we are called to cling to and exercise this kind of good first among each other. Because we won't find it anywhere else. I mean, you read the passage, and there's a reason why it flows the way it does. You know, the first couple verses are about us and God, and then for basically verse 3 all the way down, almost right to 16, it is about our relationship with each other, of finding God amongst each other. And we read in verse 4, for just as each of us have one body with many members, and these members do not all have the same function, so in Christ we, though many, form one body. And listen to this, and each member belongs to all the others. Verse 10, be devoted to one another in love. The majority of these 21 attributes are about our relationship with God and our relationship with each other in this community, central specifically. God's will for your life is to cling to and practice that kind of good, starting with each other. It starts here. There's no other way around it. For someone to say, I cling to Jesus, not his church, that doesn't make sense. This is his bride. You cannot neglect the thing he loves the most and say you love him. This is where it happens. It's right here. This is how we work out and practice thinking and doing good. It's rubbing shoulders with people who really annoy you and having mutual sanctification through that, going, you really annoy me. And they're like, well, you do too. And like, I didn't know, I know. Let's forgive and move on. We just grew. Beautiful. You know, like it's all these places where we're practicing it. This is where he calls us first, is to one another. I'll give you another example. You want to know who I really am? Me, Tomas. How spiritual I may be, or devoted, or loving, or good? The best people to ask is actually not my staff. It's probably my wife. It's my kids. That's how you're going to really know who I am. That when things are not going my way, how am I really? When I'm frustrated, how do I handle that? Am I growing in Christ-likeness? The best people to ask are Catherine and my kids. And ask them. That's not a brag. That's very fearful for me. Ask them. But that's the reality. It is very easy to pretend who we are until your very family knows the real you. And this is the safest place, because this is where we all understand that it's by the grace of God that we are being transformed. John 13, verse 35, Jesus says, by this everyone will know that you are my disciples, if you love one another. A clear, direct sign of a follower of Jesus is not just attending, but actively involved in practicing transformed living. It's this collective and mutual transformation that we walk through together. It's the same reason why, I think the other part of why I think this is so important for understand, and you think of when you go on a plane and they ask you if something happens to put the mask on yourself before your kids. It's because they want to make sure that if you're healthy and you got what you need, you're able to provide for other people. And this is why I still think the church, the local church, can be the hope of the world and hope of the city. Because hear me out. If our home, if our church is safe, the unsafe may stay. If our home is healthy, the sick will find healing. If our home is forgiving, the shamed will find dignity. If our home is peaceful, the weary will find rest. If our home is transforming, well, the hopeless, they find hope. If our home is filled with light, the lost will be found. If our home is filled with sincere love, evil scatters. If we choose to practice this in our imperfections, I wonder what impact it could have on people who come. We serve each other and among each other not because of duty, but because Christ first served us and he laid down his life for you. And it was his goodness that transformed you. We prioritize connecting with one another through small groups in different ways, not because we tell you to, but because Christ came and called you friend when you were far off. And his goodness transformed you. This is where God has asked us to begin working out his will. It's among each other. It's bigger than you think, simpler than you think, but it's also closer than you think. And so my hope for you is to pray about what that looks like for you. I know there's lots of reasons and there's lots of places and there's, church hurt and all that. I understand that. And I'm not trying to take that lightly. But I've also seen it be a place where miraculous transformation can happen when people choose to listen, to serve, and love each other sincerely. The church is filled with hypocrites. You're right. Where else do you want them to be than in a place where they're mandated to become more like Jesus and not be? Our on-ramps this morning are going to be twofold. They're very simple, but then we're actually going to go to the communion table together as part of our on-ramps. And I made them simple because I actually think this should be a process that we do, if not weekly, daily, is that we take time this week, today, to confess where we really do need God's transforming work in our lives. Because I don't know about you, but like my will often wants to overcome his. Take some time and confess and ask his Spirit to work in you and through you. The second is to then walk in obedience, to actually practice doing good out of a sincere love. And this includes getting into the Word, knowing it, meditating on it, praying through it. God, what do you want me to do? What does it look like? And to just do it. And then lastly, is to just continue to gather, to practice with each other, to serve, connect for that mutual transformation we were talking about. And Greg will say a little bit more later, we have these QR codes around that you'll see taped up everywhere. And the idea is not for you to just sign up to something just because we're telling you to. The idea is, would you take the next few weeks and pray, Lord, what does it look like to cling to and to practice doing good in this community? What does it look like? It's not to force you or anything. It's to give you the opportunity to think and pray through that. So that's what I want to do this morning at the communion table, is to give you time to confess, give you time to work in obedience, and also gather around the table. And so if you are someone who is newer to Central, we practice communion every month. And part of it is we reserve communion for those who have made a decision to follow Jesus. And if you're here and you just have not made that decision yet, that's no pressure at all. We just invite you to just watch and observe what is probably the oldest Christian tradition ever. For over 2,000 years, the church has been doing this since the command of Jesus, and also as Paul writes to us. If you've got questions you want to talk about, you can talk with me or any one of our pastors. We'd love to talk to you about it. But I encourage you to just watch. If you've not yet made that decision, but my encouragement to you, if you've made a decision to walk with Jesus, what I'm going to encourage you to do is, in a moment, there are 2 tables in the back, there's 3 tables in the front, like we always do every month. I encourage you to come and grab or take an emblem, take a cracker, take some juice. They're gluten-free, and you can go back to your seat. And I'd encourage you to take a moment and confess. Take a moment to not just confess, but to receive his incredible grace for you again, fresh and anew, and invite him to empower your living. Lord, where are you asking me to be obedient? And then I'll walk us through communion together, if that's okay. So I'll invite you to do that now, whenever you feel that you are okay to come and grab an emblem.